Why is the United States spending so much on its army? For several decades, the United States has remained the country with the largest military budget in the world, and this trend is not only continuing, but even becoming more noticeable. Spending continues to grow steadily. In 2026, U.S. military spending will exceed $900 billion. This amount is so huge that it's difficult for an ordinary person to imagine it. For comparison, if you add up the military budgets of China, Russia, Great Britain, France, and India, their total amount still will not reach the level of U.S. spending. This big gap is not an accident, but the result of a conscious political decision. The idea is firmly rooted in America. In order to maintain global leadership, the country must have the strongest army in the world. At the heart of such huge expenditures is the idea of world domination, which the American authorities, regardless of which party is in power, consider to be the natural and necessary order of things in international relations. The United States sees itself not just as one of the leading powers, but as the defender of the so-called rules-based international order. What does it mean? This means that the United States strives to ensure the free navigation of ships in important sea lanes, protect its allies both under official treaties and under unspoken agreements, deter countries that may upset the balance of power beneficial to Washington, be ready to use military force where negotiations do not help. To play such a role in the world, you need not just a good army, but armed forces capable of operating in almost all regions of the planet at once, supplying your troops over vast distances, thousands of kilometers from the United States, and having more modern technologies than any potential adversary. One of the most obvious examples of such a strategy is the huge network of military bases abroad. According to various estimates, the United States has from 800 to almost 1,300 military installations outside its country. The exact figure depends on exactly how to count and how classified the individual objects are. No other country in history has created or maintained so many military bases in terms of scale and coverage of different regions of the world. These bases are located on all inhabited continents, in dozens of countries, and perform a variety of tasks. They serve as forward points for military operations, act as stations for intelligence gathering, act as hubs for supplying troops, and act as training centers for soldiers from other countries. The maintenance of this global network costs hundreds of billions of dollars every year. This includes the costs of building and updating facilities, providing people, transporting goods, protecting territories, and the costs of diplomatic negotiations, which are inevitably necessary when troops are deployed in other countries. At the same time, each base is not just a military post, but a complex mechanism with its own infrastructure. There are often military housing, hospitals, schools, and shops, as well as everything necessary for military personnel and their families. Another important reason for the increase in military spending is the desire of the United States to be ahead in technology. The U.S. military believes that the advantage in technology should compensate for any weaknesses, such as the remoteness of combat sites or political restrictions on the use of force. Long-term investments in scientific research and new developments have led to the creation of systems such as the F-35 multi-role fighter. His program became the most expensive in the history of the military aircraft industry. According to reports, the total cost of the program, including development, procurement, and, most importantly, operation, exceeds $2 trillion. At the same time, the United States is investing in the creation of hypersonic weapons, laser systems for protection against aircraft and missiles, new combat drones, military programs using artificial intelligence, and weapons for fighting in cyberspace. The rivalry with China, which is rapidly developing its military technology, and with Russia, which retains a strong position in a number of important areas, is changing the nature of the arms race. Now we are talking not only about the quantity and quality of conventional weapons, but also about new areas of confrontation, space, cyberspace, and the struggle for control over electromagnetic waves. The military-industrial complex plays an important role in the growth of military spending, a term coined by President Eisenhower in his farewell speech in 1961. The largest companies producing military equipment, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon Technologies, Boeing Defense, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics are closely linked with the military department, the Pentagon, and Congress, forming a kind of mutually beneficial alliance. This is how it works. Large military orders create jobs in those areas from which congressmen are elected, and in response, they vote for an increase in military spending, explaining this by caring about their constituents. Influence groups from defense companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year to promote their interests in Washington. In addition, former high-ranking military and Pentagon officials often move to senior positions at the same firms with which they previously signed government contracts. This phenomenon is called a revolving door. The result is a system in which it is very difficult to reduce military spending even when some military program is no longer needed from the point of view of current realities. For example, it is almost impossible to stop the production of expensive weapons if their parts are made in factories in dozens of different states. This will affect the interests of too many people and regions. A significant part of the military budget is spent on people. Back in the 1970s, the United States switched to a fully professional army, abandoning conscription. In order to attract and retain experienced military personnel in competition with civilian jobs, it is necessary to offer them good salaries, extended social benefits, medical insurance, and guarantees of support after retirement. In total, more than 3,400,000 people work in the armed forces, reserve, and civilian structures of the U.S. Department of Defense. Salaries, additional payments, medical care, pensions, and benefits for veterans account for a significant share of the military budget. At the same time, benefits for veterans are funded separately through a special agency, the Ministry of Veterans Affairs. If these costs are taken into account, the total state expenditures on the military sphere turn out to be even higher than the official figures of the defense budget. Recent geopolitical events are further pushing up military spending. The conflict in the Middle East has shown that more ammunition, military equipment, and financial assistance to the Allies are needed. This simultaneously reduced some of the American reserves and pushed for the expansion of production in the defense industry. Instability in the Middle East traditionally requires maintaining large naval and air forces there, and the growing rivalry with China in the India to Pacific region is forcing the United States to upgrade its fleet, strengthen alliances with other countries, and come up with unconventional ways to counter China's strategies to restrict access to important areas. Each of these factors in itself could be a reason for a significant increase in costs, and when they act together, any proposals to reduce or optimize the military budget are perceived as short-sighted and dangerous. There are critics of such a policy in both liberals and conservatives, although for different reasons they agree that huge military spending does not always lead to a proportional increase in real security. For example, the long wars in Afghanistan and Iraq cost trillions of dollars, but did not bring the results that their initiators promised. Inspections at the Pentagon, which were conducted repeatedly, revealed serious problems with accounting and control over the spending of money. The cost of many military programs ended up being several times higher than originally planned. All this raises doubts not only about how wisely money is spent, but also about how decisions about military spending are made when political, business, and corruption interests often turn out to be more important than strategic objectives. Nevertheless, there is unlikely to be a major revision of U.S. military policy in the coming years, and military spending will continue to grow. Friends, what do you think about this? Subscribe to the channel and write comments.